We are your home theater and AV questions answered. This is AVRant. Want your home theater or AV question answered by Tom and Rob? Send it to question@avrant.com. Welcome to another edition of AVRant. I'm Tom Andrew, and I'm here
Rob H. This is AVRant. It's your home theater and AV questions answered. So I got new glasses, in case anybody's like, hey,
I didn't even
Rob
look.
looks
Let
a
me
tiny
go
bit
look.
different. I don't look very different. They're quite similar, but I like them. And let's see.
I can see the glare of the computer on your glasses. I don't remember seeing that
Oh,
before.
okay.
Are they somehow different?
Well,
in that
they're
way?
new glasses and new lenses, so I guess so. The coatings on my
Maybe
old
they're-
ones were like completely gone, so I guess having coatings makes them worse? I don't know. In any case, yes, there's that. Tom and I both got sick over the weekend, so I'm a
You got sick? You never
I
get
know.
sick. I never get sick,
Not-
but you really
not
never get
badly
sick.
at all, but I'm a wee bit congested, so that might be in the back of my throat somewhere. And what else should we say? We should say that you might have noticed that the title for this episode is number 686, and you're like, wait a second, last episode was 684. What happened to 685? Well, I did the interview with Alan Hutchinson from HT Market, talking all about his HT design seating and other things at HT Market. I didn't get around to posting it like before we recorded this live session, so that'll be episode 685, and the like official versions will come out in correct order. So that's how that's working.
Okie dokie.
Yep.
How did it go?
It was very good. Alan and I had a great chat, lots of good information. Our Skype connection wasn't the greatest, so there's a little bit of not great audio quality in there, but good content, and he would very much like to come back again in the future and talk to both of us at some point, so hopefully we can set that up.
I'm really sorry I missed that.
Oh,
That
it wasn't the
is
plan,
a complete brain fart on my part. That whole thing was just a mess. So for those of you that don't know, I don't wear one hat anymore.
Mm-hmm.
I have a lot of like businesses I do, and one of the things I do is I do some corporate training, and I was asked to go out to Portland to go do a couple of days worth of training. It kind of came up at the last-ish minute, but my brain was not working that week. And so if you guys remember last week, I guess 684.
Yes.
I had the run out, and Rob did the. And by the way, thank you, Rob, for
yes.
Soldiering on without me. I know you suffered. I'm so integral to this podcast.
My
these days.
throat suffered. I didn't have opportunity to take a sip very often. I had to announce when I was doing it.
So, well, thank you for soldiering
You
on it.
bet.
But what actually happened, I said it was 911 because I didn't want to have to explain anything to anybody. But the reality is the 911 was I had agreed to a lunch on a date without knowing what day of the week it was.
Yes.
I just knew that I didn't have anything else on my calendar for that day. Because I didn't actually look at my calendar, and this lunch was very important. It was a business lunch, and it was a consulting thing, and I needed to be there. And I looked at my watch, a little Fitbit, and a text came in that said, "Hey, we never talked about where we were going to meet for lunch. Would such and such be a time, such and such place be good in about 5 minutes?" And I was in shorts and a t-shirt. I'm going. I would like if you look at the video, if you can't see the color drain from my face, my camera needs to be upgraded because I was like, I completely lost it. So I ran out of here, sped across town, endangering everybody around me. So I apologize to everybody in the podcast
Doing like
for
the Mr.
ducking
Bean in
on
his
you.
car getting ready on the way, no doubt.
Yeah, it was a hot mess, and then I had to park downtown, which it doesn't even matter what town
No.
you're in, but parking downtown should imply it's not going to be
Some places
easy.
don't even allow it anymore. They're just like, nope, nobody
Yeah.
parks downtown anymore. Well,
So I'm sorry. All this was mismanaged on my part, so I apologize. And then, like you said, I got sick when I got back from my trip. It was twofold. One, I did not sleep on the red eye on the way back, and that was mostly because of decisions I made involving drinking way too much water and having a middle seat, and also because I have a really hard time sleeping on planes or sleeping sitting up.
well, even if you did, you're still breathing the recirculated air. Even if you're asleep, I'm sure you would have picked it up regardless.
Yeah. So Sunday morning, I woke up and I had like a slight stomach bug that just kept me in bed all day. I was a mess. So I haven't regurgitated anything in like a decade, and boy made up for it on Sunday.
Well, I'm glad. I mean,
Got it all
you don't seem terribly ill today, so I'm glad it was a short-lived and mostly you're over it type of thing. Do want to say thank you to the people who wrote in asking if everything was okay with Tom, because we didn't know the details. I didn't know all the details during the thing, and not my place to say anyway. So glad to hear that it wasn't actually like a horrible health thing or a family member in danger or something like that. It's all things considered relatively okay.
You could translate that into "you're an idiot." Run. So I thank you for anybody who emailed in and expressed any concern. I apologize. It was just easier to say that than it was to say any of the other things I need to say. And it was 11:30. It was 11:23, and she asked if I could be downtown for lunch at 11:30. And I was like, no. But I could be there for 11:45, which was not exactly true either. But it was really important that I was there. So like I said, I apologize to everybody for.
Well, all is well. We are back. We're gonna answer questions. Yay!
Yes. So this is AVRant, the podcast that answers your home theater and AV questions. To get your questions answered, all you have to do is ask us by emailing us at question@avrant.com. You go to avrant.com, leave us a comment there, facebook.com/avrant podcast, youtube.com/avrant, where you can see our behind the scenes and slightly better videos with desynced lips.
Yeah. The lip sync is going to be awful as long as we continue this live OBS capture thing, but at least the audio is cleaned up. That is what you're not paying for with the full versions.
One of these days we'll get some sort of high-end Cisco system, whatever. That,
what makes the completed version really worth it is the times in the show notes if you want to skip directly to a certain question and answer. That's the
images. You put images and things. And stuff
the
like
images
that.
are here in the live one.
Are they really? Yeah. I can't see them, but you guys can see them. If you want to contact Rob directly, it's rob@avrant.com. His Twitter is @firstreflect. I'm Tom at avrant.com. My Twitter's @avrant_Tom. Let's thank our listeners of the week. To become a listener of the week, you do that by supporting the podcast in some way. One of the ways you can do that is going to avrant.com and click on the Buy Us a Cup of Coffee link. We want to thank Jonathan and Russell for doing that. We appreciate it very much. Thank you, Jonathan. Thank you, Russell.
avrant.com. Over on the right-hand side, say support AVRant. It'll take you to PayPal. Thank you, Jonathan and Russell, for doing that.
And someplace in that same area of the website, haven't been there in a while, there is our Patreon button where you can go to patreon.com and support us in that way. We want to thank 107 up from last week.
At least that's what it was. I'm checking it. You know what? It's 108 right now.
Ooh. It's 108 patrons, including Justin. So thank you, Justin, and our 107 additional patrons over at patreon.com.
That's right, patreon.com/AVRant Podcast. If you'd like to sign up, think of it as a voluntary subscription. $1 per month is the minimum automatic monthly donation. Thanks so much to our 108 patrons. Justin, thank you for being one of them. I did like, for sure, the one that took us from 106 to 107. It was $1 a month, and I'm like, I am happier to see more people give $1 a month than like 5 people give $50 a month. I would love to have everybody on board for just $1 a month. That's very fair.
In the news, if you were considering Samsung a QLED TV, details for their all-new 2020 models have now been released, and unless you want to pay for one of their 8K models, all of the 4K options have taken a step backwards. Yay for progress. The new 2020 Q90T is basically the equivalent of the 2019 Q80R, and the Q80T is basically a Q70R, and on down the line up like that. To get the sort of local dimming that was offered in the 2019 Q90R, you have to step up to the 2020 Q900T 8K model now.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I am not pleased with that. I mean, I will in fact go on record and say I think the best 4K TVs that Samsung released was back when it was the Q9FN, which was 2018. I think those were the best ones that we had because the Q90R that we got last year put on that coating to try and make the wide viewing angles that made the black levels worse. So I'm like, I would rather go back to the 2018 Q9FN. I think that was as good as Samsung's 4K TVs got, and it looks like it's not like they're going to get better at this point. They're on to 8K now. That's what LCD can do at a lower price than OLED, so that's what they're going to do.
Yeah. Yay for marketing about things you don't need and people absolutely believing it. I can't wait till one of my sons says, "Daddy, should we get a Samsung because it's 8K?" No.
If you want full HDMI 2.1 48 gigabits per second bandwidth, so that not so much for 8K resolution, but more 4K resolution at 120 hertz, which is going to be a thing with the new game systems, the PlayStation 5, the Xbox Series X. Those will be able to do 4K 120, and if that's what you want, if you want it on a Samsung, you have to get one of their 8K models. None of their 4Ks have HDMI 2.1 full bandwidth.
And are we expecting those consoles out the next year?
Well, this year, this
year,
coming
this year,
November
Christmas
is when we expect.
Yeah, Christmas. Yeah.
2020. Yep.
But what I can't express to you the amount of excitement I have about this 8K thing.
Yep.
It's very hard to express in words, because I would have to use some sort of nanometer to express it. So Comcast, NBC Universal is apparently in advanced talks to purchase Vudu from Walmart. Supposedly they would merge it with Fandango and run it alongside Peacock as their pay-per-use rental service. Is this the death knell of Vudu along with everything else? Maybe, I don't know.
I don't exactly look at the names Comcast and Fandango and think, oh, yes, that's how I want Vudu to be run.
Yeah.
So, yeah. I mean, Walmart has been saying for a while now that they were open to selling Vudu off.
Who wants it?
So, yeah, definitely. If you had an ultraviolet library at any point, things are not looking rosy. So, yeah. Oh, man. Mm-hmm.
There needs to be online content insurance that you get from your credit card company.
Here's the content
just
library
needs to be
purchased when it gets taken away from me, not if.
Yeah, when it gets taken away from me, I need to be able to, when they file for bankruptcy or when they dissolve, you need to be able to that the credit card company pays you back and sues the crap out of whoever it is. And I know that that's never going to happen, but this is just ridiculous.
I mean,
it's untenable.
When Apple eventually announces that they're closing down iTunes because it's all just going to be streaming.
They will.
I mean, it very well might happen, because, I mean, they certainly have Apple Music streaming, and they have Apple Movies, whatever the thing is, streaming version of it now. So, I mean, it's not out of the realm of possibility that where you purchased your movies in a non-physical format, it could just all go away, and they'll say, hey, you just have access to it on our streaming platform now.
Right, and I'll bash Apple a little bit here as somebody who's loved Apple and has just gotten sick of their ecosystem, but they are more than almost any other company I can think of the most likely to just decide, oh, you guys don't need this anymore. Just like they decided everybody needed that was it that Beatles album or whatever album it was.
Oh, U2.
That U2 out, yeah.
Well, that was the reverse. That was everybody gets it whether you want it or not.
Whether you want it or not. But that's the sort of decision making they make over there, where they just be like, "Oh, you guys don't really want the copies on your hard drive, taking up space on your hard drive. We'll just stream it to you from now on, and then they'll be gone." And that's the sort of thing that's just going to drive me, make me even crankier than I already am, I guess. This would be the point. All right, comments from our listeners, and I'm already sweating bullets based on the first three words of this one. So, JR, you ready for the first three words? After Tom eviscerated, wait a second, I didn't eviscerate
anything. That was my word choice. I thought that was more evocative.
It is evocative. It's making me have stress sweats over here. Thanks a lot, Rob. So after Tom eviscerated his Mirage omnipolar speakers, which I did not do, I take umbrage, JR decided to finally make the switch to the KEF LS50 speakers they've been eyeing for a while. He loves them, and even though the marketing for omnipolar speakers always talked about the wide, deep soundstage to create, he's finding the KEF LS50 soundstage and the imaging to be a lot better, while also sounding more detailed. So pushing him over the edge worked in JR's favor. All right, so I eviscerated.
That's
whatever.
Right. It all came up roses.
Well, yeah, and I hate that because, I mean, I have opinions about these things, but they do work in really very specific situations.
You don't need to backpedal, Tom. It all worked out. You convinced him it was time.
Somebody out there has got their omnipolar speakers right now and is super angry at both me
they're not
and
listening
JR
to us
at this
anymore.
point.
That's how that worked.
That's probably the truth, but sorry to see you go. I hate to see you. Love to watch you. I don't remember how that saying goes. Anyways, he bought a new pair of KEF subs along with his new speakers. Initially, he had an issue getting them to play when he was using the stereo listening mode, but he solved the issue himself after, get this, reading the KEF subwoofers manual. So who knew? He's still having some trouble with their auto on sensing, though.
And unfortunately, the KEF sub, he got one of the Cube 12s, Cube with a K, because they're KEF. It doesn't have a just always on setting, which really bugs the heck out of me. It's their smart sensing power on button, which of course just means when it detects a signal, it powers itself on. So he had some instances where he's like, I put it in stereo mode. I figured I'm getting a subwoofer signal. At some points it did work, but then the standby light went red, and that is annoying.
Drives me absolutely up the wall.
So
it just absolutely drives. Like I don't know how good the auto sensing is in my SVS subs, but I don't trust it.
Right.
They're always on. I'm sorry. If that's going to cost me an extra $50 a month in power,
I'm pretty sure he's. I don't remember completely clearly what JR said his AV receiver was, but I'm pretty sure it was a high-end enough model that it has pre-outs. You could consider, as crazy as this sounds, you feed the front, left, right pre-outs into the Cube and just use the Cube's own crossover, although now your front speakers are getting a full-range signal, which I'm not a huge fan of. But I mean, if that's the only way to make sure that the darn thing always stays on, because I mean, the thing is, when you're using it for stereo listening with music, there's a lot of music that doesn't have deep bass in it for sections. It might be a while before
for long enough sections, but that auto sensing.
That's not uncommon. And even if you say increase the subwoofer output's trim levels so that the auto sensing has an easier time of at least detecting the signal, if there really is no bass playing for an extended period of time, there's still no signal coming out there. So a little bit unfortunate there. That's one of the things we hate about auto sensing. God, I don't really have a good fix for that, unfortunately. JR,
buy another sub, return them.
I mean, he just got them, so it's not like because you have KEF LS50 speakers that you must have KEF branded subs. Not at all. The other thing is they only have a 0-180 polarity switch, not a fully variable phase. I'm like, you can get fully variable phase too. So,
I mean, I hate to say that, but it's a poor design. I have nothing against KEF subwoofers in general, but anything that has an auto on only option is just, I don't care if it came from SVS, I would still be telling you to return them. So it's not a brand thing, it's not a feature.
Yeah. And I mean, if you want a similar compact, nice glossy black, there are sealed options. I mean, even if you're like, for some reason, don't want SVS because you just think we talk about them too much, like Rhythmic has some awesome options that are a nice compact sealed design, about the same size as what you got, glossy black, look great, don't cost any more. So
yeah,
they're good options.
There's options out there, right? Let us know what you do.
Mm-hmm.
Just don't buy an omnipolar subwoofer.
It is anyway.
I know.
That's the irony.
Andrew wanted to add a further comment about looking for alternatives to Harmony remotes. He tried several alternatives, but still found Harmony to be the best in the end. On top of that, they have continued to refine and add more capabilities when pairing a Harmony hub with a Google Home or Amazon Echo device. He finds the voice control to be good enough at this point that he just uses his Google Home and occasionally the Harmony app on his phone. He doesn't even use a hard button remote anymore. My brother has a Fitbit with She Who Shall Not Be Named on it, and he can control my parents' TV with it, and my parents just get a kick out of it. They asked my autistic brother to turn on the TV for him, and they're just like, look what he could do. I'm like, I mean, yeah, it's pretty cool. And that is one of you almost think of it as an economy of scale. They're big enough where they're going to continue to refine, where somebody else is going to say it's coming in firmware or we're working on it or whatever. They'll get something barely functional that's a little janky, but it's good enough, and they'll be working on something else instead. Harmony has the resources to continue to refine these things, so I'm not surprised.
Yeah, I got an Echo like 2 years ago, basically just to try it out, and I found I don't talk to my stuff I just don't talk. The only thing I talk to is sometimes I press the mic button on my NVIDIA Shield because that's the fastest way to skip forward an exact amount of time. If I'm watching something on there, I can just tell it skip forward, this many minutes.
30 seconds or something like that. Yeah,
and it'll do exactly that. So that's about the only time I talk to something. That's just me, though. If you find that you enjoy talking to your device instead, I'm happy to hear they've continued to improve it. I'm not surprised that they have, and I should probably check mine out again to see what it can do now.
I use my Echo Dot all the time for grocery lists. I use it for timers. I use it for Pandora, streaming Pandora, because I have a speaker in the room. I use it. It's connected by Bluetooth. I use it for. I was, talking with my French foreign exchange student, and if we don't understand something, we'll ask her to translate it for us, and she does a fairly decent job.
Enough that you can get the gist, right? Which is often all you really need. Yeah.
A lot of times we're like looking for specific. We're talking about something, and we're looking for specific facts, or the area of the United States or something like that. Just stuff that we're talking about around the table, and we're able to get that information pretty quickly, which is nice. But there's people who just flat out hate it.
Yep.
I know. I have friends who they put them all away because their spouse said that they felt uncomfortable with this thing listening to them all the time. I'm like, what are you talking about? I've been around you guys. You're boring. There's nothing that anybody's listening to. Whatever. It's fine. If you're not comfortable, you're not comfortable. I'm not going to judge. I will judge you, but I'm not going to judge you to your face. That's fine. Mike continues to make progress on finishing his DIY acoustic treatments, where he's basically covered most of his walls, and he's now finishing the fabric and trim. So I'm looking at these pictures. If you're online, you're looking at these pictures. It's very gray, and it looks like he's got. What are those white things on the wall? Are those speakers, or are they? What are are those lamps? Or those lights?
There are sconces on his side walls, yes. And some of the paint is not finished just yet. He's still done a little bit of patching here and there, so it isn't.
But it looks like he's got like the entire bottom of his wall. It looks like are acoustic treatments, and with he looks like he's got speakers in either columns or little areas.
That's exactly it.
It's a neat looking design.
Oh, yeah.
The white trim is very dramatic.
I'm not sure if he's keeping it white because he says he hasn't finished painting yet, so it might just not be. That might just be primed.
It might be not be done.
Might just be primer.
Yeah,
I'm not certain,
be.
But his front corner
neat.
bass traps in the images he sent haven't been completed yet, but
Covered,
good progress being made. I think it's going to be real nice in here when he's done.
Yeah, it looks very interesting. I really like it. You can see, for those of you that we've ever talked about the super chunk, like bass traps, when you take triangles and you stack them in the corner, you can see what it looks like before you cover it in these images. Right. So go to avrant.com after this podcast posts and click on the Flickr thing that Rob posts up there, and you'll be able to scroll down. It's the brownish. I don't know. It looks like somebody put spray insulation in the corner. It's sort of uneven, but you're going to cover it anyway. So
it's
who cares?
Triangles of Roxel in there. That's what that is.
I very much like this. This is sort of the kind of room that I would walk into and go, ooh, I
And also, it's not exactly a curtain skirt, but he is able to run his wires along the bottom section of his side walls because it's all just he used 1 inch thick insulation there, and there's a 1/2 inch air gap behind it, and it's just enough to run all his wires on the outside of his drywall, but behind the basically wainscoting that he's created.
Well, I really like it. It's a good job. So he ran into one puzzle, which is that his Focal Superbird surround and surround back speakers, 6 in all, he has 2 pairs of side surrounds, are covered by columns and fabric that he built. While doing some sound tests, he heard a fairly loud rattle coming from one of them. He was deathly afraid it was a blown driver. After some emails back and forth with Rob, he resigned himself to carefully removing some trim and fabric to examine the problem. Thankfully, it turned out to be just the speaker grill.
Yep.
Really? Those grills come off?
On Superbirds,
I have the birds. The supers are the bigger ones,
they are the big
right?
ones.
Is that right? So do my grills?
I don't know.
I don't think they do. Wow. Okay. Rob suggested museum putty or double-sided foam tape, but removing the grill entirely was just fine. It's behind the scrim anyways. Who cares? And you wound up doing it to all the Superbirds preemptively. Great idea. Now everything sounds close to perfect. I like that you said close to perfect. We're leaving a little.
One can never say for sure.
Yeah. One might want to upgrade someday. We wouldn't want to put ourselves in the corner here. And just to put his mind at ease, it's okay to turn the subwoofer in the middle of his back wall sideways, correct? It's pushed into the back of his rear seats if it faces forward, but it has a little room if it's sideways, and that's, of course, absolutely correct. It's omnidirectional.
100% fine to turn any subwoofer sideways. The sound waves are so long, they absolutely do not care which direction they began facing.
So the one thing that always, and I think we addressed this with the SVS guys at one point, but I never remember. So, I think about like a cylinder sub, and the driver is smack dab in the middle, and it's omnidirectional from that point. So if you put it in the midpoint of the front wall and midpoint of the back wall, right? Then the back wall, it'll be standing up, but the front wall it would theoretically be lying down. So would you want the driver to be?
I mean, it makes very little
sound got a boat
difference.
Yeah.
Because even the tallest one that they have is, well, I guess the Ultra is almost 4 feet long in total. So that's enough that it might be a little bit. But I mean,
I guess I would put it midway. I would want where the midpoint of the wall to be midway between the driver and the port.
I guess. I mean, it's just that, bass waves like 80 hertz is going to be 16 feet long, practically 15 feet long, somewhere in that range. So it almost doesn't matter. Right. Yeah. I mean, it's similar to like if you put two subs at the front of your room on either side of your center speaker, they are in essence working as one subwoofer because that's just not enough of a difference for them to act independently. The sound waves are too long.
Surely somebody has asked this question before that we've answered it, and I've forgotten the answer.
No, the sound waves are so long, it doesn't really matter.
All right, let's get to the questions here. Damien. First up, Damien says that Rob's suspicions about his Room EQ Wizard output settings were correct. He had it set to output test tones at 0 dB FS.
Full scale, yeah.
It's full scale.
Which for 16-bit audio is just over 96 decibels.
Ooh, that's loud. So now he has lowered that to negative 22 dB, as we suggested, and measurements via his Cross Spectrum Labs U-Mic 1 are going well. He lost his Audyssey mic when he moved. He just got a replacement. When he didn't have the mic, he manually set his speaker levels, distances, and crossovers. He used the standard 80 Hz crossover setting, and his Ascend HTM 200 SE surround speaker sounded fine. Now he's got the replacement Audyssey mic, and the first run-through set his surround speakers to 120 Hz. After he repositioned his wall mounts, it set them to 110 hertz, and then he's tried our suggestion of using one subwoofer output to feed both of his subs, and now his surrounds are set to 100 hertz. Well, if you adjust a couple more things, you get down to 80 hertz. It's only a matter of time. Have you considered moving a chair in your room? There's some pillows that can maybe be adjusted. Fluff something up. So why the inconsistency? You never ran into that before, and where should the crossover for his surround speakers actually be set?
Now, this is a different room than he ever ran Audyssey in before. He said he lost the mic during the move, so the last time he ran Audyssey was a totally different room. That is definitely part of it.
Well, it's that too, and I wonder how reflective this room is compared to other rooms, because a lot of times that's what I find makes more, gives the mic more problems, or gives the measures more problems. Is the more reflective your room is, the more likely the mic is going to have different results, because it's going to be highly just a little bit of adjustment on your part as to where the mic was set up for each of these settings could make a pretty big difference. I would say anywhere between 100 and 120 hertz was where I would set it, and then you could test it.
Right.
But with surrounds, I kind of let Audyssey do its thing. My rule of thumb, and I've said this many times before, is if Audyssey sets it above, okay, well, I guess that just happened. If Audyssey sets it above 80 hertz, then I leave it there. If it sets it below 80 hertz, I adjust it up to 80 hertz.
And I mean, a setting like 100 or 110 is no problem. It's not an issue if that's where things are set. I mean, the way, if you want to be super anal about it, that you're going to play sweeps through just one surround speaker at a time. We know you have a U-Mic 1 and Room EQ Wizard now. You could even measure the darn thing and see where the speaker begins to roll off. I imagine that if you were to measure measure it, you'd probably see some squiggles in the everywhere below 150 hertz. That's most likely what's going on, which is why, you're running Audyssey multiple times. Even if you're like, I'm putting the mic in the same spot, it's not exactly the same spot. And we know how with bass, you move even just a few inches one way or another, and you could be in a bit of a dip or a bit of a hump. That isn't the case just a few inches over in any given direction. Right. So you're probably got some squiggles everywhere below about 150 hertz right now. All it's looking for in Audyssey is where it hits minus 3 dB compared to the average. And it goes, all right, that's where I'm setting the crossover now. So, I mean, none of this is like exactly problematic. If you really want to see it, play a sweep through just that speaker, see what the response really is since you have the ability to measure.
From the guy who was just wondering whether or not he should move his subwoofer if he was lying it down, which I am not doing, a couple of inches one way or the other, this is, I wouldn't worry about 10 or 20 hertz one way or the other.
It'd be different if it was like one time it gave you 60 and the next time it gave you 180. We'd be like, what happened?
Yeah,
but this is like all in the 100 hertz-ish range, which is very reasonable, so, yeah.
So when he was just setting the distances manually, he measured the physical distances of his two subs and entered them as 24 feet and 15 feet. Once he got his replacement Audyssey mic, when he still had it set to two independent subwoofers, it set them to 22.5 feet and 13.2 feet. After summing them together and feeding them both a single subwoofer output, Audyssey set the subwoofer distance to only 12.5 feet. He should just leave that alone, right? It just seems so weird. Is he missing something? No, you're not. It is weird, and you're right. It does feel weird to do this way, but remember, the distance setting for all the rest of your speakers is a physical distance between you and the speaker. The distance setting for the subwoofer, and remember, both your subwoofers and your room are all acting in concert to make bass, which means it's all one system. It has two drivers at two different, or maybe more, at two different sides of the room, but it is all one system. So this is a delay, not a distance.
Yeah, the idea is if you played a ping out of one speaker and you played a ping out of the subwoofer output, that if you played those two pings at the same time, they should arrive at your brain, essentially, not even your ears. You should perceive those pings as having occurred at the same time. Now, in bass, it's much more complicated because you are never hearing the direct sound that made a straight line from either subwoofer to your ear. The sound wave is longer than that distance. And so the sound wave has gone from the subwoofer, bounced off of multiple walls before it reached your ear or the microphone. And what the microphone is doing is saying, okay, now I've got this one bass sound. It's being produced by two drivers within a room. I'm capturing the reflection when it finally reaches the mic and saying, what delay do I have to apply to that to make it sound as though the ping out of the subwoofer came at the same time as the speakers? It's more complicated than you certainly can't just measure it with a tape measure. And I would absolutely leave it alone because it is doing the better job of that. And it's basically saying, all right, this is how many milliseconds of delay I have to apply, and now it all arrives at the same time.
I swear that when they first started doing measurements here, for this, they didn't really understand what it was doing, because I remember the manuals not having very good information on this, and it took me a couple of years before someone finally explained it to me adequately enough for me to realize that subs were completely different than everything else. It's just a crazy
it's the notion of time alignment, but when you're trying to align something where you don't perceive the direct sound, then that complicates things a lot.
Yeah. All right, Andrew. Andrew is finishing a basement. He's got a main room where his theater will go. It's roughly 31 by 16 by 9. It's a nice space.
Big space.
But it's not a perfect rectangle. The back of this section is where his theater area will go. Is a bit narrower, with the left wall coming in. Boy, that's it's so.
Yeah, so if you look at the renders below, it's actually a little bit easier to see what's going on here.
Oh,
so he's got this one main large section where he's going to have his theater set up. That in total is 31 feet long, but the back of the room is narrower because the left side comes in.
And it sort of kicks over to the side a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah. So It's very hard to explain this.
A little bit.
But,
it would be easier to come to YouTube and see the renders make it quite clear what's going on here. But yeah, you've.
I'm actually surprised he's using this back portion as part of his theater, because it looks like that's what he's doing.
Yeah, he's got like a bar table back there as a pseudo third row and a second couch that's
couch.
Back there. Yeah, and then the main couch, of course, is facing the...
So are these rooms open to these other spaces?
Well, there's a description below, so we can continue on.
All right, I'm scrolling still.
Yep.
So this is not an enclosed room. Gee, it's almost like you read my mind, Rob, when you wrote this question. To the right, it opens up to the games room, and there is also an opening on the left to the entry snack bar. Although the render showed that opening as what appears to be a standard doorway size, so perhaps a door could be added on the left. Andrew wants JBL synthesis, but on the cheap.
That's his goal.
Well, at least you're being realistic. Maybe. I mean, maybe we could do this. He has already started dealing with a retailer called Northern Sound and Light just outside of Pittsburgh to put together a sound system using JBL Pro speakers and Crown amps. He's strongly leaning towards the new price monolith HTP-1 as his pre-pro. All right. So it's basically the entire basement is open. Yeah. He's got he's got big openings on his left and right, and this whole thing is going to be massive. So the setup is mostly for sports and TV. He does not intend to have total light control, but his seats will be 12 feet and 21 feet. So he still wants a big projection screen. He's thinking 140 inches wide. Note that's a 52 field of view for the front row. While sports and TV are the priority, he says he wants as little compromise as possible for movies. He hates the idea of watching CinemaScope content on a 16:9 screen with black bars above and below. So he's thinking of a constant image area set up with a manual four-way masking. Furthermore, he was hoping for ambient light rejecting, but also acoustically transparent. What are our thoughts as far as the screen plan goes? I think that 140 inches suddenly kicks you up into a projector that's significantly more expensive than something that, if you just didn't get something so dang big,
becomes problematic. And for that front row, which I have to imagine is going to be the primary row, you're not always going to have lots of people over. Sometimes it's just going to be you, or just you and your wife, or something like that. 52
degrees is freaking huge.
Really big, and it's problematic for your projector. So given all of that, we're going to suggest going for a smaller screen size. Now, I'm going to end up telling you that if you want all the other things you talked about, because look, I understand, and I've said I am okay with actual ambient light rejecting in appropriate circumstances, and I think this is one of those. You're mostly going to be using it for sports. You're not going to want to be in pitch blackness when you're doing that, and I think ambient light rejecting, a true ambient light rejecting screen, can make sense here. Acoustically transparent is possible, but not from very many brands, and where I would be pointing you to is IlluneVision. IlluneVision does allow you to have a proper ambient light rejecting screen that is perforated to be acoustically transparent, without the price becoming absolutely ridiculous like it is from the only other ones that I know, which would be like Stewart Film Screen, and the price goes way up. Right. And their largest standard option is 135 inches diagonal, 16:9. Now that's 10 feet wide. That's 120 inches wide, 135 inches diagonal. They can make custom screen sizes. You could go as large as a 150, but from 12 feet away, 135 is exactly the size that I want anyway. So I would consider that. Now, the rest of your plan being like, I want manual four-way masking. You know how many times you're going to use that? I'm gonna be generous and say thrice. I think after the third time that you've used it, you'd be like, this is too much hassle. I'm not getting up and down to take up and down these masks anymore. I just don't think you'll do it once a year. Right. I mean, you will for sure do it once because you bought it. And then you'll probably do it twice because you bought it. And then you'll be like, I'm going to use these, and you're probably going to use it the third time. And then I think that's it.
They're going to be 10 feet long, that's right? They're 10 feet long.
And he said,
where are you going to store them? This is a 9-foot room.
He said constant image area, which means he's also going to have side masks for when it's 16:9. I'm like, no, just get a 16:9 screen. Most of the time you wanted to watch TV and sports. And we're saying go with the smaller screen size. I'm saying get the 135. From your 12-foot viewing distance, that's going to look fantastic. Sports are going to look awesome on that. And then when it's movie time, look, not all movies are 2.35 to 1. People seem to have it in their head that like all movies are 2.35 to 1. Avengers isn't, Joker isn't, Ant-Man is, like lots of big movies are not 2.35 to 1. And just get the 16:9. If you're worried that the back row isn't going to have as large a viewing, I'm like, you've got room back there that you could move that back sofa a little bit closer to the screen. It doesn't have to be 9 feet farther back than the front couch, in my opinion. I'm sure he was doing that to keep it out of the way of the entrance to the game room. But there's room to the side. I'm like, so all of this, I am not in favor of your complicated screen plan. That's what I'm getting at. I think simplify this. I'm very okay with ambient light rejecting here. Get the perforated one from Illusion Vision. I'm okay with it being acoustically transparent too, but leave it at that. Maybe you go bigger than 135, but don't do... 140 inches wide is what, 168 inches diagonal, I think? It's too big. Your projector's going to struggle too much with that.
Right. So I'm going to go... I agree with everything Rob just said, except for I still don't believe in ambient light rejection screens, even in this situation. Right. I think putting... and it doesn't have to be opaque curtains between these areas, but like even just enough to sort of diffuse the light as it comes in, and then being able to black out that room that the screen is in will be enough. Because
I'm just I really think when he's having groups over to watch sports, they likely are not going to black out the main theater.
I can understand that, but that is the exception, not the rule.
Sure.
Okay, so the rule is going to be most of the time you're going to have full light control whenever you want to. Therefore, that's how you set up your theater. And if there's people over and you have some ambient light on, it's still going to look better and bigger and more wonderful than anything they have at their house. So I would not even worry about it. To buy an ambient light rejecting screen for a situation where it's the exception and not the rule is compromising the majority of your viewing, in my opinion. Now, if this really is, we're only going to be down here when we're having parties and stuff, great, fine. Then you're right. I think you should get it. But if you're going to be watching TV down here, once or twice a week, every day, or whatever, and then when you in the Super Bowl and certain college bowl games or the World Series or I don't know, whatever sports it is that you're into are on, you have people over or you have them over every weekend and you really are using it mostly for that, fine, get it for that. But I still do not love compromising your main viewing but that's just
so we disagree on screen material, but when it comes to the whole idea of doing constant image area versus just 16:9, when it comes to the whole idea of doing masking and all that, we both agree, like, nope, don't bother with any of that. Get the good screen, and that's it.
Honestly, and you've got such a humongous area here. I mean, if you really want to have that massive 52-degree field of view for your front row, I think building a false wall, pushing your 135 or 130-inch screen forward,
or
so that you get that.
He could just sit closer. He's got the option to sit closer in these renders, that's for sure.
My thought is, in this situation, he's got so much stuff else going on in here. Having that false wall come forward where you could put all your gear and everything behind there would be a really nice solution to trying to run wires and do.
He's
already
planned for the false wall installation though, so
yeah,
this would be even close. But I mean, I would just say if you want the even bigger field of view, just move your seat closer. In this instance, I like his existing false wall plans, so I wouldn't personally change that. Yeah.
So he considered bringing in a JBL Synthesis ARCOS installer to do their computational fluid dynamic simulation. He doesn't know where to install his subwoofers or exactly how many he will need in his non-rectangular room. So he thought the analysis might be worth it, but it costs $10,000. That's right.
JBL Synthesis is not cheap, folks.
10 grand.
Yeah, just for the analysis. That's not any of the equipment. That's just to come in and do the analysis.
So is there any alternative way to plan where his subwoofers ought to go to get the best results? So they have the multi-sub comp thing?
Yeah, there's the multi-sub optimizer software, which is free, but
which is a lot less than 10 grand.
It is, but that's not a pre-planning. It is this is where I have put my subs. Now I'm going to measure their response and come up with the optimal individual equalization level and distance or delay settings for each of the subs to give me the most uniform and linear bass possible. But it is an after-the-fact analysis, not a before-the-fact analysis. However, that is absolutely the way I'm going to point you, because it's not as though when you look at this room that you have truly limitless possibilities of where subwoofers are going to go. Just realistically speaking, there are a number of places that you are realistically going to position your subwoofers. Now, for the multi-sub optimizer subwoofer software to do its best job, they want you to have more than 2. They would like you to have 3 or 4 subwoofers, and given the rest of the system that he's considering, I think that's feasible. You're going to want to have them. Now, what they suggest, if you have 3 subwoofers, is to have 1 in a front corner, which I believe his plans basically call for anyway, 1 somewhere across the room from that first one, not necessarily the diagonally opposite corner in the 3 subwoofer setup Earl Getty's approach, but something along those lines, 1 towards the back of the room, which again, somewhere behind that bar area seems feasible in here. Mm-hmm. And then a third one that is basically as far away from the other 2 as you can reasonably get, which is probably going to end up being like your right side wall or something like that. Or maybe your left side wall.
I was going to say it would be inside that game room with the
but I'm not going to go putting a sub inside the game room myself. Right. So it's probably going to be like, if you put it in 1 in your front right corner, 1 in the middle of your back wall, and then it'll be on your left side wall, or vice versa if you switch the front corner. Something like that. You start there and then run the multi-sub optimizer software, and it does a very, very good job. And the only additional, well, in his case, he's not going to need any additional equipment because of the processor he wants to buy. So I think that's the way to do this. I know it isn't actually full-on Arcos, but you said you wanted to do synthesis/Arcos on the cheap. You've got to...
Doesn't get much cheaper than buying a U-mic or whatever you can get from Herb these days.
That's right.
And a free software.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So is it exactly the equal of Arcos? No, I can't claim that.
No.
But it's remarkable how much you're getting for... 2 orders of magnitude less than $10,000?
I guess I'm looking at this setup here, and if I were going to place these subs, in this setup, I would put them to the side of either, on the walls, just underneath the surrounds, the sides of either couch.
On both side walls.
I feel like that's sort of like smack dab in the middle of this space.
It kind of is, yeah. I mean, honestly, that might work out just all by itself, and you're done.
I mean, that would be very, very... I don't know. I would be willing to try it and just run Audyssey with that and see how it sounds.
Well, he won't have Audyssey. He'll have Dirac coming up. We'll find out. But, but also that is still fine.
Yeah. So, I mean, just looking at it, that would be my...
I can sort of dig that, honestly.
Gut reaction. Yeah. And frankly, I've never ever claimed I was anything other than lazy. I would do that, and if it sounded pretty good, I'd be like, oh, thank God I don't have to do all those measurements.
Fair enough.
All right, so he listened to several Atmos demos, and he's never been impressed. He doesn't want big holes in his drywall, so he planned on on-wall JBL Pro speakers rather than in-wall, and no in-ceiling speakers. Rather than using the Monoprice HTP1 for 9.1.6, he wants to use its additional channels for Dirac for a greater number of independent subwoofer channels. So is he nuts for thinking more along the lines of 7 dot something rather than Atmos? Absolutely not.
Dude, I am so okay with this. And if you do end
Where would you even put the Atmos speakers with the 2 rows of seats being so far
Yeah, you
apart?
actually could. This is a situation where if you did do overheads, having 6 overheads would actually make some sense in here.
I think he should have 8 overheads. I think he should have top fronts and top rears for the front row and top fronts and top rears for the back rows.
But in any event...
I honestly believe that. They're too far away for it to make sense to do it any other way.
I don't know. I could get away with 6 in here, but no, we are both totally fine with you not having overhead speakers. You know what? Your monoprice HTP1 is still going to say Atmos on it when it's an Atmos track, because 7 point however many subs is still an Atmos compatible configuration. Objects will still work in the floor layer, but no, that is totally fine. And yeah, using the additional channels that are built into the HTP1, if you do end up getting more than 2 subwoofers, you've got the ability there without even having to buy an external mini DSP, which is only $100, but still, you don't even have to buy it. You can use the multi-sub optimizer software just with your monoprice HTP1. You're golden.
You're going to hate me, but I don't even like doing 7. I think 5 in here because the rows are so far apart. I don't think that, I mean, where you put the mic so that in your front row, right?
Yeah.
And your rear surround, your surround backs are back behind the bar stools.
Could be.
That volume level, in order to get it up to that mic, which is now going to be, 15 feet in front of it?
These are JBL
like
Pros, though. They can do it.
I'm not saying they can't do it. I'm saying whoever's sitting in that back row is hearing nothing but surround backs.
The people in the bar stools would be. That's true. Yeah.
So I might even consider not even going with surround backs in this situation. I know you're going to hate me, but this is such an unusual setup. I would think more along the lines of a more traditional movie theater where they have a whole bunch of side surrounds, so that everybody's getting that good side surround information, and that stuff in the back. I
guess you could maybe put your
they'll
surround back speakers, if you do have them, put them high so that the people in the bar stools are not getting blasted by ear level surround back speakers.
Yeah, something like way up in that, like almost in the corner.
Yeah, basically where rear heights would have gone, but you're just going to call them surround backs. Yeah.
Do not be surprised if you install all this stuff and then that people complain about those speakers and you end up
turning off the surround backs.
Yeah. So while he's willing to spend good money, the budget is not unlimited. He has plans in mind for a full double drywall with green glue and sound clips and hat channels. His biggest concerns are the HVAC noise from his adjacent utility room and footfall noise from upstairs. But to do the entire media room and games room in full-out soundproofing construction gets expensive and complex. So does it need to be all or nothing? Could he just damp his HVAC and the upstairs footfall noise somehow? We should note that the side walls that separate the media room from the snack bar on the left and the utility room on the right are load-bearing. So a lot of times we get questions like this where people are like, I just need to get rid of this one sound.
Right.
The rest of the sound doesn't bother me so much. Well, unfortunately, sound is like water. It doesn't care that you don't mind it going one place as long as it doesn't go to this other place.
It's going to go where it will go.
It will go.
Yes.
Yeah, so I think you're on the right direction here by not putting holes in your ceiling for in-wall
big fan of that
and stuff like that. The double drywall, the green glue, the hat channels, the that sort of thing. I think that's all going to work really well in your favor. You're just going to have to look for those flanking paths.
Yeah.
And
I think he's hoping, though, that he doesn't have to do double drywall, green glue, sound clips, and hat channels for the entire room. I think he was hoping to get away with that. Now, your idea of just somehow damping the HVAC and damping the footfall noise without the full soundproof construction, no. Can't do it.
No.
So put that out of your mind. And I'm going to tell you that your entire ceiling has to be sound clips and hat channels, 2 layers of drywall with green glue. The whole ceiling. Just resign yourself to that. You can't spot treat your ceiling. Not going to work.
Right.
So the whole ceiling has to be. But not every single wall in here has to be the full sound clips and hat channels, double drywall, and green glue, because it's very clear that some of these walls are external walls. So what I want you to do is picture everything that is truly load-bearing. Now, that's going to be your external foundation wall. It's going to be the 2 walls that you mentioned on the left and right sides of this media room. But that is your first room, all right? Everything that is load-bearing, your foundation and all that, that's your first room. And what you want to do is have all the drywall that is going to be exposed to sound. That is now your second room. All right. Now, that means that for all your external walls where don't do furring strips and drywall connected directly to the furring connected to the foundation. Don't do that, build actual 2x4 framing inside of your foundation walls. But then all you need is insulation and one layer of drywall. That's all you need for those external walls. You don't have to put sound clips and hat channels if you've done framing inside of your foundation wall. For the party walls that are your interior walls that are separating from the utility room and from the room on the left-hand side, those you have to separate what is holding the drywall from what is load-bearing somehow. Now, that might be what is already there, the framing that's already there. You put sound clips and hat channels, 2 layers of drywall on that. That could be that. Or perhaps you construct entire new studs or staggered studs in between the existing studs. One of those ways, you have to separate the new drywall from the existing load-bearing stuff. But all the external walls, you don't need to do the full sound clips, hat channels, double drywall thing. You just have to separate it from the foundation. So it's not like truly all or nothing, where no matter where you are in this room, it's the entire construction. That's not necessary. Even soundproofing company will tell you that's not necessary. You simply have to make sure all the drywall in here is not connected to the load-bearing part of this, and now you have a room within a room. But the ceiling, got to be done, the whole thing.
Right. There's no, yeah. And I 100% agree with that. That's, I mean, my question you just answered, which was, what do we do about these load-bearing walls that are inside? Makes perfect sense. But yeah, you have to do the entire ceiling.
And the other thing I'm going
to
tell you, this being a basement, do the dimpled plastic on the floor, subfloor layer of tongue and groove over that, and all your new framing gets built on top of that. So your floor must go in first. Your ceiling should be installed before any of the walls, and your new walls that are just holding your drywall go in between your new floor and new ceiling. That's where they go, and that's how you now have a room within a room that is separated mechanically from your load-bearing room.
So he'd like to have a fridge, or at least a mini fridge, in the snack bar area. Is that going to ruin his media room's noise floor? See, this is where I run into these issues with these questions. You're talking about not having light control. You're talking about having a bunch of people over, and now you're worried about whether or not the refrigerator is going to be too loud. I think all the people not being quiet is what's going to be too loud.
But like this snack room, it's a normal doorway. Like, can we not just put a door on that doorway, please? Now you're done.
Let's pretend that he can't. Let's pretend, or he decides he doesn't want to, and that would be fine. I mean, literally, you do what we do when we shop for receivers. We don't look at the amount of power. No. We don't look at number of channels. A lot of times, we look for the exact features that we need.
Okay.
And as long as it's got that, then that's what we go for. So, what are you looking for in your refrigerator?
Quiet.
How quiet is it? The more quiet it is, the more you're willing to buy it. You want the world's most quiet refrigerator.
I don't understand why the snack doorway has to be open all the time.
That's literally what you'll have to do is to do that. Don't get an ice maker because that's what makes the most noise. That's the mechanical noise that happens in there. So get one that doesn't have an ice maker, or turn the ice maker off.
But I'm like, if he wanted to reduce his cost of soundproofing, rather than having to drywall also the snack room, like, now you just have to worry about the media and the games room, and you put a door in the door. It solves so many problems. So that will always be my solution.
All right, Francis on Facebook. Francis wants to upgrade his small B&W M1 satellite speakers. He's 12 feet away from his front speakers, so we normally wouldn't say towers are necessary, correct? He's always gone for very small speakers, but now he wants speakers that will offer better performance, higher output, without any distortion and more neutral sound. The thing is, if they're going to be larger than satellites, he doesn't want plain black boxes. They need to have some style. He liked the way the SVS Prime speakers sounded, but that's the sort of price range he's considering, about $500 a pair, but they just have such plain looks. So he's glanced at Monitor Audio, Q Acoustics, and Dolly. He already has some KEF satellites for his front and rear height speakers. What would we suggest? Have you looked at Accessories for Less for their KEF offerings? Because KEF makes some pretty nice looking speakers that would, if you've already got KEFs, then
I know that was my first
some more KEFs.
thought. But this price range, even at Accessories for Less, it would be the Q series.
Right.
And the Q series speakers, now, if it's a matter of finish, there are different finish options for the Q series. You can get gloss black, you can get gloss white, and you can get a walnut finish. But in terms of the shape of their bookshelf speakers in the Q series, they are the most boxed that has ever been a box. Just completely 90-degree corners, sharp angle corners everywhere. And for some reason, the grills are extra, which boggles my mind, but... that's what Kef has done with the Q series. So I don't know. If it's color, there's options, but if it's shape, then that is as plain a box as has ever been.
Right.
So, I mean, now I know you, Tom, like Dolly. So if he likes those looks, that is certainly a consideration. Like, to me, the Q acoustics, they're rounded, but they're still pretty plain. So to me, Dolly, out of the ones that he listed, is probably... but I have one other. I'll let you talk about Dolly first.
Well, I mean, I've heard a lot of different Dolly speakers. So, and they've been at different price points, and they've also been at different levels of performance as far as I was concerned. So, I would be a little. I'm not hesitant to say go audition some Dollys and see if you like them. I would not say buy them sight unseen or ear unheard. I would definitely take a listen to them because they can be. I've heard some that were definitely tuned to have more bass and others that were tuned to be more neutral. Right. So I would definitely take a listen before I bought anything from Dolly.
Now, the one I'm going to suggest to you are Aperian's new Novus series of speakers.
How have I not heard of these? Have I?
It's come up, but... they're relatively new. Now, I don't know if you'll like their looks, but at least they are not just plain black boxes. They're available in gloss white if you don't want black. But they have, angles to them, slot ports that make them look a little bit more unique. If you take the grills off, the tweeter kind of looks a little bit interesting. So they at least have some aesthetic interest to them. They aren't just your completely plain looking speakers, and they're in the sort of price range that you're considering, and it's completely free shipping both ways, so there's really no financial risk if you just want to give them a try.
Do they have a slight layback to them?
Yep, they're raked back just a little bit. So that's my suggestion, because I think at least they're not just completely plain. All the speakers I go for, I'm like, I don't care about looks. I just want flat, matte black that isn't going to reflect any light. So I'm not the person to ask when it comes to style at all.
I'll be honest with you. I've got absolutely, I think that a lot of people in our, line of recommendations, we get so focused on performance that, suddenly... aesthetics don't mean anything.
Oh, yeah, because you look at the Ascend SE or the ELAC, I'm like, those are just plain black boxes. That's what they are.
Yeah, there's really nothing exciting about them
but they sound
I don't
really
think there's anything wrong with wanting a speaker that looks good.
Not at all.
And that was one of the reasons why the RBH's, the Impression series, was such an easy recommendation for me, because not only could they play loud, they were inexpensive, and they looked great.
Yeah. Hopefully the next iteration continues that, but we can't mention them right now because they're not available.
Yeah, nothing's available right now, so maybe wait for RBH to come up with something. Depends on how desperate you are for an upgrade. But those, I got no problems recommending Aperian Audio. They've done what Kef did with that Blade thing, which was that Blade came out, and it was like all the technology they can shove into one speaker, and then since they've put that speaker out, it's been filtering down through all of their lines and getting cheaper and cheaper, and it's really been a huge benefit for that company as far as I'm concerned. And Aperian did sort of the same thing with their Tangerine waveguide and everything else they did, so I think it's really helped. Greg has a multi-purpose room in his basement where he would like to set up his theater. It's 22 by 24 by 7 on its own. It's 3,700 cubic feet, but it's open to the stairs at the back of the room, and those stairs are open to the main floor, so it's a bajillion cubic feet.
Unknown question mark feet.
He'd like to go with SVS subs. Well, which model? Well, how much do you like the rest of your house?
Yeah.
Because you need the Ultra 16s, I guess, or whatever the top of the line is that these days. You need the biggest one that they make in order to get there. And in which case, I think you should probably go with like Power Sound or Rhythmic. But because for the price you get more performance for that. It's not going to be any prettier, that's for sure. But you'll get definitely a huge amount of output. You could spend a lot less money and buy a door.
Doesn't have to be at both ends. Could be the bottom or the top where the door gets installed.
You pick one.
I mean, if you do install a door and you're now dealing with essentially 3,700 cubic feet, I would probably tell you a ported 3,000. That would crush 3,700 feet.
You could go with the 2,000 Pros, but you'd be pushing pretty hard.
I mean, if you're trying to hit full reference volume at 20 hertz with a 2,000 Pro, it's the little limiter light might come on sometimes. But if you're never pushing reference volume, then a 2,000 Pro would be enough, and then you have the option of going with the cylinder in that case too. But if you want all the headroom and the limiter light never comes on, and you want to hit full reference volume, then in 3,700 cubic feet, a ported 3,000 would get you there. So that's that side of the easy answer. But if this room is now, think of it like water, right? If you filled the whole room with water and all you have is a doorway to a stairway, it's not as though all the water rushes out of that room instantaneously. It is a narrower area, but if you had a door versus not having a door, a lot less water gets out of this room, right? So if you picture it that way, that's what's going on. It's not that like all the base is escaping this room somehow and going up those stairs, but a good amount can, versus having a door. So certainly the door would be really nice to have. But
regardless, I think that either one of these two options, depending on you're not going to want to pressurize the entire house,
right?
So
no, you're not going to want to. I mean, if the cylinder
what fits your budget better?
If the cylinder is really attractive and you do want to start getting close to reference volume, and you're not going to install doors. Install doors.
That was fun.
Vocabulary,
that was fun to
Rob.
hear.
Vowel sounds. Let's sort it out. Yes. Anyway, then you would want a PC 4000.
I'm not the only one that does that.
No, it happens. No, you'd want a PC 4000 in that case if that's what ends up going on there. That should be all the options.
But if you really are wanting to hit reference volume without installing doors, I would consider looking at power sound and rhythmic.
Right.
And, just eschew aesthetics for raw performance in that case. Ryan just got a Panasonic UB420 Ultra HD Blu-ray player. Rather than go through every setting yet again, we will post our link for episode 677 when we went through the Panasonic player settings one by one for Joe. So that was question 1 answered. Yay!
That's right.
So, and dude, honestly, we get the same questions over and over again, and don't ever think that you shouldn't. I mean, I'm not talking to Ryan, I'm talking to everybody. Ask the question.
Absolutely.
That's what we're here for.
Yeah.
Just ask the question.
No,
and then we can send you the link, and it'll be fine.
In an instance like this, where we have covered exactly what he wanted, and we can send a link directly to it, I think that's fair, rather than literally speaking it all out loud again.
Well, and it's a far cry better than saying, Google is your friend.
Right.
Use a search button.
No. Direct link right to the answer.
Whatever the crap is they say on the AVS forums these days. Whatever the new insult is for that. Yeah. So he asked, what is deep color? What is it used for? And why should it be on or off?
Yes.
It's one of those things where I know what it is, but I've never really thought of it in this way. But I mean, isn't deep color, it's not really deeper than, it's not like it's extra color. It's just extra color compared to what we used to be able to view.
Well, unfortunately, the term has kind of changed over the years. I mean, what deep color means outright in a definition sense today is simply more than 8 bits per channel in RGB. So this would be like 10 bits per channel for RGB, which would be 30-bit color total, or 12 or 16 bits per RGB channel. That's effectively what deep color means. What is it used for in modern video signals? Because where deep color first came around was when Sony introduced XV color. I don't know if you remember that, but that was
I do not.
A long time ago, Sony introduced XV color, which was a thing they had on their camcorders, which their televisions could then show, which was essentially just 10-bit color. I mean, it was like a 12-bit system, but the number of colors it could actually show was closer to 10-bit. It was a whole thing, but it got called deep color. So what is deep color today? Like I say, it's basically anything over 8 bits. We use it for HDR. We use it for Dolby Vision. In the case of your Panasonic, he showed what settings he already had, which was the default, which was deep color, priority 10-bit. That is what you want, because that is what is on the discs. That is what is coming out of the player. That is what your television can handle. So 10 bits is deep color, because it's more than 8, and that's what you want. And it's used for HDR.
How do you know which HDR TV type you should use? It's fine to have the different choices listed, but how does an owner know which one is correct? Now, is this about nits? Is this?
Yeah, it's about the Panasonic's HDR optimizer, where the player now decides the maximum number of nits coming out of the player that get fed to your TV, and they call it HDR TV type. That's the name of the setting.
Right.
Really, the best thing I can do here is point you to Artings, to Ratings, and go read their review for your model of TV, because they will describe in their review in great detail exactly how many nits your television can produce, and you'll want to base it off of that. You need a little bit of translation, because all Panasonic tells you is basic luminance, high luminance, extra high luminance, or ultra high luminance or something, and then the OLED setting, which is the same as your standard luminance LCD. So basic is 500 nits max, standard or OLED is 1,000 nits max, and the extra or ultra, or whatever the highest one is 1,500 nits max. You'll look, like if you have one of the flagship Samsungs, you'll want to set it to the highest one, because they can get up to 15 or 2,000 nits. If you've got an edge-lit one, you're going to want to set it down at basic. You don't want more than 500 being sent to it. You can't do it. If you've got one that handles 1,000 nicely, then it's your standard.
I want to be mad about this. I want to be irritated that they don't just give you the number of nits. But honestly, I don't think that would have helped anybody anyways.
No, they're just trying to describe it. They're like, is my TV super bright, or not really very bright? And that's kind of how they do it.
I kind of feel like this is something that will be worked out in like an HDMI handshake later on, where the TVs and the players will communicate with each other. But for right now, we're having to do it manually.
Or you could do my suggestion of just every TV analyzes frame by frame, and you don't even bother with metadata coming from the content.
Right. So if you've got all the settings correct, but HDR still seems to look too dark, what should you do?
Now there you have to change the setting in your TV, not the player. That's what you're going to need to do there. Pretty much every TV that has HDR has 2 modes. They'll have like an HDR or an ISF dark mode, and then they'll have an HDR or an ISF bright mode, or they'll have Dolby Vision dark and Dolby Vision home, or some such thing like that. That's your easiest one by far, is just to switch over to the bright mode or the home mode, or whatever the not dark mode is. The dark mode is the technically most accurate, but it's meant for a dark room. There's no question about it. So if you've got a normally lit room or sunlight coming in, you're going to want to switch your TV to the brighter version. And that's perfectly okay to do. That's what it's there for. There's nothing wrong with doing that.
So at the time that he wrote, he had only watched one Ultra HD Blu-ray disc so far, but from that one example, he preferred the way the 1080p Blu-ray looked. Does he need to get his eyes checked? Well, okay.
There's so many possibilities here.
So many possibilities here, but let's just talk about like in general. So for the first time ever, you've gotten a new TV, a new, completely new disc format, a completely new everything, and you've set it all up and it looks weird to you and you don't like it. So what could be the possible culprits here? Well, first things first, and that's the questions that he's been asking up until this point. Did I set everything up correctly? Sure. And these things are not cut and dried. They're not intuitive many times, especially when it's a new technology. Things are clunky. Things don't work together the way they're supposed to. And, give it 5 years and suddenly all this stuff it'll do it itself and you won't have to think anything about it. But for right now, it takes a little bit more research on your part. And sometimes even with that, it can be absolutely, obtuse in its logic. So I don't blame you at all for that. But on top of that, there could be the issue of it's different and therefore different equates to not being as good. It's like going from 1 sub to 2. And when you first go to that, you get your 2 subs, you get them properly set up, and you're like, I don't hear as much bass as I used to hear. I don't like
quieter.
This.
What happened?
It got quieter in here. Why is it quieter? Well, it's quieter because there's none of the boominess that was happening at certain frequencies, and now it's only booming when it's supposed to be, and you're missing that lack of boominess. So does that make it bad? No. It just means that that's what it is now, and it's more correct than it used to be.
Yeah, piecing together and reading between the lines of the questions he sent, I suspect you have been used to your television actually being brighter in standard dynamic range for regular Blu-rays and cable.
Right.
I suspect you have gotten used to it being brighter than the industry standards. Now, the industry standards, again, are meant for a very dark room. And if you don't have a very dark room, you do not have to actually hold to the 100 nits maximum of the actual industry standard. But I suspect that he is used to his television being considerably brighter than industry standard. With the HDR modes, like the Panasonic player, out of the box, there isn't very much for you to adjust. And, we did go through the settings one by one if you really want to double check. But when your TV gets that, I mean, almost all HDR TVs, when they go into HDR mode, they go into a pretty accurate mode. We haven't seen HDR modes on TVs that by default are wildly inaccurate. And seeing actual low light levels, possibly for the first time, or at least, that you're used to in your own home, that could be all of it. Saying it looks too dark. I thought the 1080p Blu-ray looked better. That could just be that it looks brighter and more vivid because it's brighter. And I suspect that's a lot of it.
Gray. Yeah.
That's right.
Your blacks would be gray, and now your blacks are actually black.
So I would encourage you to, again, you can go just by Arting's description of the settings that your television should have. It'll get you close enough, even if I nitpick 1 or 2 settings here or there, they'll get you well close enough. You now have your Panasonic settings. Now you are seeing an accurate image. Give yourself a chance to get a little bit used to that. Try to darken your room if you can, because that is what all of those settings are meant for. And you might come to appreciate, like, oh, actually, everything was quite a bit blown out, or I had the color set, to the point that it's like neon and garish, but that's what I was used to. I don't know. I don't know what he was looking at before. But reading between the lines, I think he was probably looking at something brighter than industry standards.
It's sometimes there's a calibrating your brain portion of getting more accurate sound and pictures, and that's just something that we all have to go through. I walk into people's houses and look at their TVs and go,
"Oh yeah,
really?
Oh yeah.
This is how you're watching it, is it? Wow, that's a thing that's happening."
Yeah, filmmaker mode is going to be a rude awakening for a lot of people.
Is that what red looks like in your world? Because it looks a little bit different than it does in mine.
I predict filmmaker mode is going to be turned off by many, many consumers.
Many, yeah. Christian on Twitter. Christian asks, what do we recommend for PC speakers? He wants them to sound better than your average PC speaker and be as small as possible. There's an easy recommendation for this, but I just want to address first physics.
Okay.
Okay. Asking for something to sound as good as possible, which usually means having as much of the frequency range produced by it as possible, and in a fairly flat manner, and asking for as small as possible they're contradictory statements. Those two things do not go together, and it's understandable. I want small speakers on my desk as well.
Oh yeah, of course.
And I completely understand that, but you're sacrificing performance to do so. So the more space you give your speakers on your desk, the bigger you allow those speakers to be, the better they can potentially sound. So consider that. Consider that there's a lot of speaker manufacturers out there that make narrow and taller speakers that you could put on your desk that will sound quite a bit better than just something that's physically tiny that you might put there. But our go-to every time somebody asks for computer speakers is Audio Engine.
Yep.
Every product in their line sounds good, and you can literally buy them based on their size.
Yeah,
This is
you
the
want
size
the
I want.
smallest one. It's their A2 Plus these days, which I think
that's what I have.
No problem recommending. Very nice sounding and reasonably priced. So, yeah, Audio Engine, man, they'll get you where you want to go.
All right, Dan asks, could Rob and Tom list what gear we use in our personal home theaters? Yes, we can. So Rob's listed this here, but I think this Epson is wrong. So I think the Epson I have is I think it's the 6020.
Oh, maybe it is the 6020.
I think it's this the Pro Cinema 6020 is what I have for my projector, which I love. I do love it, and I'm very happy with what I have. When I had to switch back to my other Epson or whatever that was when when that projector went down on me, I was extremely distraught. It's like going from an OLED back to my Westinghouse LCD. It just would not have gone. I have a Silver Ticket matte white screen. It's a 1.1 gain. I think it's 92 inches diagonal, if I remember correctly. I have a Denon X4400H. I have a Dayton APA 100 2-channel amplifier for my top middles. I have two SVS PC12 NSD cylinder subs, which I will never get rid of unless they break, because they are so much more than this room ever needs. And SVS keeps wanting to send me subs, and I keep saying no. I currently have in here a mix of speakers. I have, for the front threes and for my surround backs, I have a Purion Audio first generation of their Veris Grand speakers. I have the towers, the center, and the bookshelves in the back. Then for my side surrounds, I have some Emotiva, can't possibly
whatever their bipole one was. I'm forgetting what that name was now.
Yeah, I can't remember what they are. As my side surrounds above my heads, in the fronts for my top fronts or whatever.
Front heights,
top fronts.
I guess they'd be.
Front heights are the what you
prime
call
elevations, right? Up there.
Prime elevations, thank you. And then I've got surround for my top middles. I've got the Focal birds. But SVS has just sent me all new speakers. We've been talking about them. I got them right before I left on my trip. They are still sitting in boxes in the back of my room. So I will have the Prime Ultras, or no the
just
SVS Ultras up front for the front two bookshelves and the center channel. I need, before I can set these things up, I need to buy stands for them, because they are larger. They're large speakers. They're large bookshelves, and the stands I have are too high. So I need to buy shorter stands. Then I will have the satellites as all of my surround speakers, surrounds and surround backs, and I have another pair of the elevation speakers to replace the birds that I have overhead. So I will be all SVS. You will after that
subs as
which is great. They heard me complaining about it. They offered to send something. I said, fine. And, you send whatever you want. I don't care. They could be used. They could be returns. They could be dented. They could be dropped in one corner.
Whatever.
Discontinued. I don't really care. I'm done having tower speakers up front. That is really the only thing I really wanted to replace was my tower speakers. I'm not going to replace those. I'm happy with the Purions. I've got no problems recommending them. I have more problems recommending them now that Purion has put out their stupid super tweeter piece of garbage thing. But other than that,
you don't have to buy it. It's entirely optional.
Please don't buy that.
Forget that
but
it
you can buy
exists.
Everything else from them. I have for sources. I have the PS3, the Xbox One, and the Sony 7.
Oh yeah, you got the X700.
X700 Ultra HD Blu-ray player. Yeah. I have a Harmony Elite remote. I have an H15 power conditioner from APC and a Panamax battery backup. I have room treatments that I made myself for the most part all the way around here, with a number of GIC tri-traps, which are just a holdover from my days with Audioholics. They are super duper falling apart. Just from like the there's like these thin veneer top and bottom things that were just hot glued on. I guess that's what it looks like. It looks like hot glue. And those are all falling off, but they still work. So the room treatments are all that. And then the couch is something I bought, and I don't know what brand it is. I just got it at a local place.
All right.
Other than that, I'm looking around. I've got some Blue Jeans cables that I'm using. I've got one pair of SVS cables that I'm using up front that they sent me. I think one had spades and the other one didn't. One had banana plugs, just so I could look at the different ones. They sent those a long time ago. There is Nintendo Switch in here, but I don't use it. That's my kids. I don't think there's anything else I can see in this room that would be of interest to anybody. All right.
Okay,
go.
so I have a tiny home theater room. It's my den in my apartment, so it's like 11 by 12. So I have a 75-inch Sony Z9D. So that it's like the best LCD that they ever made, and it still does 3D. That's why it's in there, because my home theater room has to be able to play 3D, and I guess I'm never going to be able to upgrade from that display. My receiver is a Marantz SR7010. I have, ridiculously, an ATI AT1800 7-channel amplifier, which I absolutely do not need, but I want it and I have it. I have 2 SVS PC13 Ultra cylinder subs. Again, that had nothing to do with my current room. I'm like, I'm never upgrading my subs. These will work in any room. I have 11 speakers from Ascend Acoustics. They are all Sierra RAL ribbon tweeters, but they're all custom in one way or another. So up front, I've got Horizons, but they're custom cabinets because I wanted vertical ones that could stand without being wide, and then I wanted a very skinny front to back center. So those are all custom-made cabinets. Sierra 2s basically everywhere else, but those had a custom finish on them at the time. I just wanted matte black. That's my customized finish, but they weren't available at the time, and that's what I got. Sources, I've got my Gateway PV. We call it a PVR in Canada, a personal video recorder, but it's a DVR from Shaw. That's my cable company. I've got an NVIDIA Shield Pro, the 2019, which it basically used exclusively for Plex. I've got an Apple TV 4K for all my streaming, Xbox One, PlayStation 4, Nintendo Switch for gaming. I've got a Harmony Companion remote. If I need anything on a touchscreen, I just pull out the app on my phone. I use 2 APC J35B battery backups for my power protection. I've got elite home theater seating. I've got a sofa, which was a custom build from there because I needed a sofa that could be taken apart so I could transport it. So they made one for me. It's very nice. Quest and Yorkville are my speaker stands. For room treatments, I went with Gick Acoustics. They're room kit number 2. And I also have some Metrofuser diffusion panels on my ceiling from Auralex. And for decoupling everything, because everything must be decoupled, my speakers in my room, Auralex Gramma isolation risers and Mopads.
Oh, I'm going to be using those things. I forgot about our isolation pads.
Yeah. My wiring is like pretty much all Monoprice or primecables.ca, which is basically reselling Monoprice.
Yeah, I got all my cables from like Home Depot for the most part. All the stuff is in my walls and stuff like that. If I were to redo this room, if I would make any changes, I would simplify a little bit, and I would get rid of. I would not get rid of, but I would probably get something like an Apple TV and then just have a Blu-ray player, an Ultra HD Blu-ray player, and that would be it. I almost never, not almost never, the amount of times games are played in this room can be counted on one hand over the course of a couple of years. It just doesn't happen very often. It's only when people come over. I don't play games. I don't have the time. I would love to, but I don't have the time for it. And most of the games the kids want to play are on PC anyway.
I literally haven't turned my Xbox One on in over a year and a half at this point.
Yeah, the only reason I turn it on is because that's what I stream everything through.
Right.
It's easier than the PS3, and the interface is,
and it can do Atmos at least.
Well, yeah, and I also have it connected to that hodgepodge, whatever the hodgepodge or whatever it's called. Yeah, Hopog. Whatever. The thing that's connected to an antenna. I have an antenna, which is what's the brand that I got? Sky or something like that, or
the Leaf,
the one
Mohu?
that everybody has.
Wasn't it a Mohu?
Yeah, it's a Mohu Leaf antenna. It's behind my screen. It's in the window that's behind my screen.
Yeah, that works.
So I would. That was about the only thing. I love the Harmony remote. I've said it many times before. All the room treatments I've built myself, and I've rebuilt them.
Yeah.
So this is like, I will take them apart and redo them and then put them in different cases and recover them and everything. It's I've recycled a lot of this stuff. Hope that helps. I don't remember who asked the question, but hope that helps you. And if you have any questions about any of our gear or, anything else, but, Rob seriously chose his gear.
Oh, yes.
Because it was what he wanted. He did a lot of auditioning. I just, I've acquired gear over the years of working in this industry. And, I'm, if I were to go out and buy something, it would take me months of auditioning before I would even consider purchasing anything.
I have my forever speakers and subs and amplifiers. Something drastic would have to happen for any of that to change at this point.
Infinite Gary. Gary says, if you get a disc that has an Atmos soundtrack on it, but you only play it using a 5.1 speaker system, your AV receiver doesn't say Atmos as the playback format. It says Dolby True HD, or at least his does, and it should, because that's what it's playing. That is correct. So all the sounds that would have been coming out of the Atmos speakers, those are getting played by the 5 floor level speakers now, correct?
Yep.
Yes. So how do the regular surround sounds get mashed together with the overhead Atmos sounds while keeping all of the sounds at the correct volume levels? Do the normal surround sounds have to be made quieter so that Atmos sounds don't get lost? So remember, first of all, everything that's in the track, all the actual, channel-based sounds and everything, that's all in the floor levels, and then there's a metadata that's supposed to be giving your height information. I mean, and the way that you get information over your head or even behind your head if you're using only a 5.1 system is through phase. And that's how they're adjusting all these things so that it gets
well, it doesn't have to be anymore. I mean, that's the beauty of object audio is they can take individual sounds and apply actual coordinate-based metadata to them, so they don't have to extrapolate based on phase and timing and things like that anymore. They can just be like, this sound, if you have the decoder that can handle it, these are the coordinates where it's supposed to come from. You figure out how to put it there now.
Right, which ends up being phase. So, I mean, if you only have a 5.1 system, that's what it's going to end up being is phase. That's how they put it there. I mean, there's no other way to do it.
But all the sounds are in the soundtrack. I mean, I think what he's thinking is like, if I've got 2 sound sources being sent to one speaker now, like 2 channels of sound, even though it isn't really channels, being sent to one speaker, then doesn't everything come out too loud? Well, no, because if you think about 2 waveforms and you just add them together, because that's all we're doing. And it's the wonderful thing about waves is you can take any wave and just add it to another wave. You can also subtract any wave from another wave. And all that happens is you can, if you just looked at the points on a graph, as you go along, you just add the values together and that becomes your new complex wave that contains both of the waves that got added together. That's how waves work. It's like really simple and mind-blowing that it works that way.
Like, I have had it explained to me multiple times, and it still doesn't make a dang bit of sense.
But that's all it is. It's amazing. You can break down any complex audio wave into a series of individual sine wave tones. It is mathematically entirely possible to do that. The amplitudes of none of them change, the amplitude being the volume level. None of it changes. Nothing gets lost. You can add it together. You can subtract it, and it's all still there. It's really remarkable, but that's the wonder of waves in math. And that's all it is, Gary.
So Cody and Andrew. Cody recently got a Epson 3100 projector. It's 1080p, no HDR. He doesn't plan to worry about 4K or HDR for quite a while. So what would we recommend for just a regular 1080p Blu-ray player, or would we say that he should still get an Ultra HD Blu-ray player anyway? Well, that's a good question.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you my answer for somebody who has a 1080p projector and is literally quite terrified to even consider going up to 4K because I'm pretty sure the cable in my wall is not going to support it, and I'm going to be very irritated by the entire experience. So what is my solution? My solution was to just buy an Ultra HD Blu-ray player anyways. And that was simply because I wanted the Atmos soundtrack.
Yeah, because I don't know if Cody has an Atmos system, audio system. Right. No.
So if you don't, then you really are going to stick with just blind Blu-rays. Like, to me, I know eventually I'm going to have a 4K something or another. Sure. It's only a matter of time. I'm kind of hoping that I go from projector to direct view so I can just run a short HDMI cable from right there to right there. I'm hoping that I end up with an actual screen.
Yeah, like an 85-inch flat panel isn't going to look dramatically smaller than what you have. So
what I have right now, especially if I move it forward a little bit by putting on a piece of furniture. I would be, it feels like if I'm going to be buying discs, I really don't see there being another disc come out when 4K is doing really pretty poorly as far as I can tell. I don't see them saying, "Oh, 4K is just a hit. This is the bomb now. Let's go ahead and go with 8K." I feel like 4K is the last disc format we might ever see. So I feel safe in buying them, and but I also feel like what I end up doing is I look at the Blu-ray and I look at the Ultra HD Blu-ray, and if the Blu-ray has the Atmos soundtrack, I'm much more encouraged to buy that.
Yeah, I mean, it's not as though regular 1080p Blu-rays, for some technical reason, can't have Atmos on them. They totally could, but studios have decided, by and large, if there's an Atmos version, that a lot of cases they're only putting the Atmos soundtrack or the DTS-X soundtrack on the Ultra HD version. There's no technical reason it has to be that way, but that's happening quite frequently. So if you do have an Atmos audio system, then you've got a pretty compelling reason to get an Ultra HD Blu-ray player, because then you can get the Atmos or DTS-X for sure on the Ultra HD Blu-ray disc. So the one I would point you to, now everyone's going to be like, oh, of course he's going to say a Panasonic UB420, but in your specific case, because what you care about most with your 1080p SDR projector is HDR to SDR conversion. That's what you need to be really, really good. In that case, I'm going to point you at Sony's X800M2. It's $250, but that one allows you to manually adjust the overall brightness of how the HDR to SDR conversion looks. And pretty much nobody else, I mean, it used to be Oppo, but they don't make players anymore. So that's kind of the only game in town for having that kind of manual adjustment of HDR to SDR conversion now. Technically, it is a Dolby Vision player too, but it's only manual. You have to manually turn it on and off because Sony is dumb. But that would be the one to get if you are worried about Atmos and you want to have the Ultra HD Blu-rays for that. If you're like, nope, don't have an Atmos system, don't care about Ultra HD Blu-rays at all, then I'm still going to say Sony and get their S3700. It's only $70, and it's a really good Blu-ray player. Yeah.
So Andrew wants an Ultra HD Blu-ray player in Canada that will be better than his Xbox One S, but won't break the bank. Wait, Xbox One S is an Ultra HD Blu-ray player, right?
It is.
So, I honestly, as much as I love to bag on Microsoft and their Xboxes, they're perfectly serviceable, and not just serviceable, they're perfectly fine Blu-ray players.
Yeah, they do make chroma errors, though.
Well,
because they convert everything to RGB and then they convert it back and they don't do it correctly. So there are actually picture image errors in it.
So, I mean, I've watched Blu-rays. So my, in fact, I have to talk to Rob about this too, because that Sony, for some reason, seems to have its aspect ratio all screwed up.
Oh.
And it's fine when I'm playing Ultra HD Blu-rays or just regular Blu-rays, but I put a DVD in it the other day and it just lost its mind. So I ended up having to watch the DVD on something on the Xbox because of it.
Yeah.
But the menu is now like, it's like wider. It's like taller than it's supposed to be or something. It's very, I can't figure it out what I did wrong here.
Something got messed.
So something got messed up with that. But I mean, I would, if you have an Ultra HD Blu-ray player already in the house.
Yeah.
I mean, why spend another $250 to get another one? But if you really care.
Well, anyway, in this case, I will point you to Panasonic. I mean, they're my normal go-to, and if he wants an Ultra HD Blu-ray player, I'm assuming Andrew, in this case, has an Ultra HD display. Now, I don't know if your Ultra HD display is Dolby Vision, because if it is, then my normal go-to of don't break the bank, but it's really, really good, and it has Panasonic's HDR optimizer, is the UB420. But that does not have Dolby Vision. Now, in Canada, it's $299, not $250 like it is in the States, but hey, that's actually a pretty decent conversion rate for us. In Canada, we get a good deal in terms of currency conversion on the UB820 because it's 500 Canadian dollars and it's 500 US, and yeah, that's not how conversion rate works right now. So we're getting a good deal on the UB820 in Canada, but it's $500. I don't know if you want to spend that much, but that does get you all the things, including Dolby Vision. But it's going to be one of those Panasonic players. If you're like, yeah, for $200, I don't care about losing Dolby Vision, then it's the UB420. Get them at Visions. They are the like online and countrywide retail in Canada that's carrying the Panasonic players.
Cool. Jonathan with the Sea Den Theater. C as in SEA, like Seahawks, and den as in
it's a den.
A place where bears go to hibernate. Jonathan is getting his second subwoofer. He will be following Rob's 12-step guide.
Okay.
So he understands that we say to send both subwoofers a mono signal, and he understands that if he sets his Denon X4400H to 2 subs, it will calibrate them independently, so he wouldn't be getting mono. But is it really necessary to use a Y splitter cable? The X4400H has 2 subwoofer output plugs. Isn't there some way to set it so it's basically acting as an internal Y splitter? And the answer is no.
Yeah. Would that there were a way, because that would make a lot of sense. And the cheap AV receivers,
I was going to say,
have 2 subwoofer plugs, but don't have sub EQ
it's just
HT.
internal Y splitter. Yeah, there's an internal Y splitter on them.
That's what they are. But unfortunately, you got a more advanced AV receiver with the sub EQ HT, and they don't just give you an easy way of outputting from both subwoofer plugs a mono signal for
That's what
whatever
we should
reason.
ask the Sound United guys is when they're going to add that feature.
That shouldn't be that difficult, but
It quite literally is do less, please.
But in any case, no. I mean, a Y splitter cable is very inexpensive. But good question, because it does seem like why would I have 2 plugs? But no, that's kind of the way it is.
I just wish you could set the volume of one, the volume of the other, and then say sum the
without
else.
the distances and the EQ having to be different. Yes.
Yeah. Maybe someday. Look for the 4800. X, Y, Z, or something. So he's read through the guide, and he understands that we'll be playing a bass sweep on repeat. But since he's never done this sort of dual subwoofer setup before, could we explain in greater detail exactly what he should be listening for? Rob's guide says that you aren't listening for linearity right away. So if the whole sweep isn't supposed to sound even, as in one consistent volume for the whole sweep, then how are you supposed to know when you've got it right? So what you're looking for is that in each seat that you sit in, or each space that you're sitting in, or each location that you're measuring in, that it's loud at the same parts. If it goes up in one part of the sweep, it goes up in one part of the sweep for everybody. If it's got a dip in one part of the sweep, it's got a dip in one part of the sweep for everybody. So you're looking for a uniformity in unevenness, if that makes sense.
And that's why I suggest going to audiocheck.net and creating your own bass sweep and using the version where there's a little check mark option that says marked. And I suggest having that, because what it does is it puts in a little squelch tone every 10 hertz. So you can easily count by those squelch tones where you are in the sweep. Every 10 hertz, you're going to hear a little. So that allows you to go to seat. You're listening to this bass sweep. It's playing on repeat. It's marking itself every 10 hertz. And you go, okay, in this range, in every seat that I sit in, it's a little louder than the rest of the sweep, but it's a little louder across every single seat that I sit in and hear the sweep. And it's not louder in one seat, but quieter in another. That's the type of non-uniformity that we're attempting to avoid. So that's really all it is. You're going to be playing this sweep. You don't expect it to sound like one consistent linear volume across the entire sweep. But as you go from position to position, you can use those marks to determine that, it's up in every seat between these 2 marks, and maybe a little down in every seat between these 2 other marks. And that's what you're hoping for.
What are we doing time-wise here?
We got about 20 minutes left.
Okay. Yeah, that looks about right. Okay. I just misaligned my words here, so let me fix that. Nick just bought a Denon X3600H receiver. He uses Ascend acoustic speakers, but he's starting with just a 4.1 set of speakers. He had planned to wait and fill out his planned 7.2.4 configuration a little at a time, but with his X3600H sitting there staring at him, he started speaker shopping online. Dave over Ascend has frequently recommended Sonance in-ceiling speakers as a good match for his Ascend. So Nick managed to find some 6.5-inch Sonance in-ceilings going for about $150 a pair, which was less than half their retail price, and that seemed like a pretty good deal. Like most in-ceiling speakers, they have an open back, and these will be going in the basement ceiling, so he isn't required to have back cans as far as building codes go, correct? I do not know.
Typically, yes. I mean, you don't need the attic fire code safety type of cans.
I would still check, though, with somebody.
Yeah, I mean, if anything is like a plenum, if anything is like an air return space, and sometimes that includes a semi-open space in between floors is used as a plenum, anything like that would still require an enclosure. In his case, it's not going to matter because he wants them just for sound purposes, but in general, like, you're not going to have the fire safety cans that an attic installation would require. In general.
So I would still check with somebody, but yes. Nevertheless, he wants back enclosures to prevent sound leakage and to maximize the performance of his new in-ceiling speakers. Sonance sells two options, a cheap-looking plastic cover and a much larger full box made of MDF. The large MDF boxes go for almost $200 each, which seemed a bit much when he's getting the speakers for $150 a pair. The plastic covers are about $45 each. So in terms of how these speakers will perform and in terms of how much sound would leak to the upstairs floor, how do the two different enclosure options compare? It sure looks at first glance like the large MDF enclosures would be way better on all fronts, but is that actually true? And are there any cheaper alternatives that we could suggest? Well, the cheapest alternative is to figure out what the enclosure
dimensions of the
dimensions
big MDF
are,
box are.
And then just build it yourself.
Yep, and it doesn't have to be expensive material. You grab some OSB and you glue that thing together, put some insulation inside, seal up the edges of your box with some acoustic caulk, and that's it. Takes a little bit of effort on your part, but it doesn't have to look pretty. So
it's going in the ceiling anyway, so who cares?
That's the cheap solution.
That's the cheap solution. If you can do that, then that's what you do.
Yeah, definitely. Because so the little plastic boxes, I mean, those are essentially your keep my attic insulation out of the back of this speaker boxes. That's really what they're there for. They are also, of course, the retrofit option, because the big boxes, you got to cut something. If that was a finished ceiling, you're making a hole in there to put that box up there, whereas the little plastic ones can just snap onto the back of the speaker and fit in retrofit wise. So that's what those are there for. But there's no question the little plastic boxes leak more sound. There's obviously a lot less internal volume in there. I wouldn't be surprised if they even rattled a little bit sometimes, because there's not much structural integrity to that piece of plastic. Get the dimensions of the MDF box and make your own, because even if you're not handy, you can make a box that doesn't have to look pretty at all.
If this is a basement ceiling, then you're putting it in a bay, right? So what you're really needing to do is just take a piece of 2x4 and, quote unquote, wedge it, between the ceiling that you've got there and the floor above you, and then put that in there, seal it up from underneath somehow. You have to make a bigger hole than you normally would. I mean, anytime you say anytime I hear the word just. All you have to do is that means that person doesn't know what they're talking about. And I just said it like 3 times. Okay. So clearly it's probably a lot more complicated than I think, but it's certainly doable. And repairing a little bit of drywall is probably a lot less than $200 per box.
Well, I mean, if he was willing to put that MDF box in there anyway, then it's no different than that.
Right. So go on. Because you have a recommendation, right, for something he could buy?
I was going to say there is the option of Dynamat's Dynaboxes. There are a vinyl box solution that can be retrofit, because you can actually roll them up and fit them through the hole that you've made for your speaker, and then unrolls inside. But they're like $100 each, so they're still more expensive than the speakers that you bought, which doesn't make a ton of sense, but it is an option that exists.
Okay. So one pair of in-ceiling speakers will be installed in drywall, and the other pair is going in a drop tile ceiling. Does he need some sort of support bracket for the drop tile installation?
Yes.
One would think so.
Yes, you do. Yeah, you don't just want the little foam drop tile thing to actually try to hold the weight of your speaker with the dog legs on the speaker.
Especially with that MDF box on the back of it.
Yeah, no, there are very simple brackets that are exactly meant for drop tile ceilings. They basically look like a letter H made out of metal. Sometimes it's just 2 bars with kind of a circle thing in there, but it just spans across the supports that you already have. And sometimes you need to beef up your existing supports a little bit, some extra wire going from the metal T-bars up to your ceiling. But yeah, that takes the weight of the speaker instead. It's a letter H looking piece of metal.
On the display side of things, Nick is spinning a bit out of control as he tries to make sure he gets everything that he wants, but at the lowest price possible. Dude, I feel your pain. In his current theater, he's got a 50-inch plasma that he's been waiting to upgrade. He sits only 8.5 feet away. Then in a different room, their old rear projection TV has finally died. Hopefully you took it out back and beat it like the Office Space fax machine. Rear projection TVs I've never enjoyed myself with them. And maybe you've got a fantastic one, but though everyone I've seen, I was just like, it just made me angry looking at the dang
I'm
thing.
sure it's
like,
just
really?
the lamp, and could theoretically, you could just replace the lamp, but don't tell anybody else that.
Don't tell your wife or
let
your
it go.
significant other
That's
that
right.
$100 lamp is...
Oh, it's probably more now. I don't even
problem.
know where you get replacement lamps for rear projection TVs anymore. It might be expensive.
Lamp Genie doesn't have
I don't
them?
know.
I'm
I've
sure
never
they
looked
would.
for those.
I didn't either, and I don't think anybody should.
That's right.
Ever. Let that technology go. Just let it go. So anyways, a new display of some sort is getting purchased now in his theater. What Nick truly wishes for is a motorized 4-way masking setup with a JVC 4K projector. He's envisioning being able to have the borders of a projection screen perfectly match any aspect ratio and having a projector that can match the black levels and contrast of his plasma. But all of that is way too expensive and ridiculous. But go on. If he were to go for a projection setup, he likes the idea of being able to watch 2.35 to 1 and IMAX content with a greater than 50-degree field of view, basically having the screen's width equal to his 8.5-foot seating distance.
Yeah, 1-to-1 width to distance. That's big.
That's big. And then he'd want to be able to mask the top and the bottom and also mask the sides so that regular TV content could be smaller. Since motorized 4-way masking costs, and I'm adding this word, way too much, and he doesn't want to deal with manual masking, he came up with the notion of 3 motorized screens. Elite Screen sells their V Max Dual model, which puts a 16:9 and a 2.35 to 1 screen into a dual roller enclosure, and then he was thinking of having another 16:9 screen for the alternate size. Then he was thinking he'd hop on a refurbished Epson 5040 UB before they're all gone, and he'd actually be able to afford that whole package. But then he realized his smaller 16:9 screen was only going to be about 90 inches, so that made him consider something like an 85-inch flat panel for the small 16:9 screen. But then he was worried that going from his plasma to an 85-inch LCD would look too noticeable a downgrade, so he wondered if the 77-inch OLED could work instead somehow. No matter what, he's thinking he'll move his 50-inch plasma to the other room to replace the rear projection TV that just died. But what's going to replace the plasma in his theater? He's fallen down the rabbit hole, so can we sort this mess out? Yes. Get the 77-inch OLED and stop it.
Yup. It really is the solution here.
I mean, I have never been more sure of a recommendation in my entire life. Stop it. Stop it with all the rest of this garbage. Stop it. OLED black levels are black.
Oh, yeah.
It is just like masking. Just tell yourself it's masking.
It's better than your plasma. Even your plasma didn't get as black as an OLED gets. You
want to have a stupid screen size compared, viewing angle? Sit closer. Just stop it.
I mean, I'm not opposed to having 2 screens. I mean, especially if it's like, yeah, sometimes we have all the lights on here. Projector isn't going to look its best. I want a projector for when it's dark and big movies, CinemaScope and IMAX. And then for in the day viewing, I want a TV. I'm not opposed to that. And I've gone down the same rabbit hole of like, how do I get the borders to perfectly match? I could do motorized curtains on the left and right instead of motorized masking. I could get one of Seymour's motorized screens where it has, motorized masking across the top, and then you can adjust the vertical size of the screen. I can use motorized curtains on the left and right. And I'm like, guess how many times I'm going to do that? Once because I bought it, twice because I bought it, maybe 3 times because I'm stubborn, and then never
showing
again.
Off for somebody. Yeah.
Never again will it actually be used. I'll end up using 1 screen size all the time because we're humans, and that's what we end up doing. And my answer is exactly the same. Yeah, here, 8.5 feet away. 8.5 feet we can definitely become 8 feet. That is easy. And 8 feet from a 77-inch OLED, while maybe it's not 1-to-1 width to seating distance, I'm like, I don't know if that's actually what you want, man. That's really big and gets annoying pretty quick, at least to me. Yeah. I don't like having to move my head around to see, but some people, that is what they like. That's okay. And maybe one day in the future, you do end up with a projection screen that comes down in front of your OLED. And believe me, if you've gotten used to an OLED, nothing but a JVC will do, because even the JVCs aren't as good as an OLED, but they get the closest. But yeah, right now, It is the 77-inch OLED. There's no question. If you can afford that, you get that. Your plasma moves to the other room, and yeah, I mean, you're coming from a 50-inch, a 77-inch OLED is going to look big and spectacular. Yeah.
That's the answer. All the rest of that just made me just reading it made me die inside just a little bit.
I have gone down that exact. I have thought. I've done the thought experiments and all the. I mean, I would love to.
That's me shopping for an amplifier.
That's
what
right.
That is.
I would love to have motorized 4-way masking too. I mean, nothing is slicker than that, but it gets out of hand.
Let me tell you about a 4-way motorized masking. Let me tell you what happens. Rob's absolutely right. You'd use it once because you bought it, twice because you bought it, maybe a third time because somebody came over, and then you don't use it for a while, and then you go to use it, and it doesn't work.
Yep.
And you can't. And it's because the motors are frozen, or the Harmony remote. The thing isn't lined up or something.
Well, I mean, and there's the idea too that
wrong.
I'm gonna use Cody, and I'm gonna set up my own movie server, and for every movie I'm gonna use the metadata program to enter the aspect ratio of this movie, and I'm gonna have macros for every movie in my library. When I push the button, the screens are gonna go, and like you have all these plans, and like you do it once, and then the rest of your server library never gets its metadata updated because it's not that difficult, but it takes some time, and some time is too much time.
Right. Somebody out there would do all this, but they charge like $50 an hour to do it. So they're called custom installers. So they'll be happy to do it for you. But I guarantee you go to their theater at home.
Yeah.
And if they do have a projector, there's no masking, and there's there's no multiple screen sizes.
They probably do have, if they're a custom install, they probably do have a 2.35 to 1 screen, but they've probably shrunk the image down so that the top and bottom fit inside and the sides are blank. That's like every custom installer in the world. That's what they ended up having.
David wants a recommendation for a TV for the break room at his work. He wants something around 50 inches. A bit smaller or bigger is fine, and as cheap as possible. The only requirements are that it has to be able to stream from both iPhones and Android phones, and it has to be possible to connect a laptop to it with some kind of cable. Well, I mean, almost every laptop on the planet right now can connect via HDMI.
Even if it doesn't have HDMI, they probably have a display port, and you can get a display port to HDMI adapter.
Yeah, adapter. Yeah. So that's an easy one.
Mm-hmm.
Out of the box, streaming both Android and iPhone. So first of all, my first thought for this is some sort of Vizio, probably with an IPS screen, so it has the wider viewing angles.
Maybe.
Yeah, because depending on where the break room, how people sit and stuff like that, I would just be looking for something super bright and cheap, and that's going to be Vizio in their lower lineup. I'm not looking at the M series, more than likely. I know, maybe.
Well, you said super bright, so once you want brighter than the entry, but yeah, Vizio is going to be the safe answer here because their current models, the 2019 models that are out now, they did both. So they have SmartCast built in, which is already based off of Chromecast. So it has Chromecast built in for sure. So stream from Android, no problem. And they've got Apple AirPlay 2, which does video as well as audio. So they got you covered on the main things that you want. Yes, it's just HDMI inputs, but yeah, whatever your laptop has, you're either HDMI out directly from the laptop or DisplayPort to HDMI converter. So checks all the boxes. So the question is, are you getting the V series or the M series? Because the V series doesn't have any local dimming. Except for there are like two. Vizio did a weird thing where like they put the V, the size of the TV, and then either a 5 or a 6 in the V series. The ones that are the V, the size of the TV, and the 5, no local dimming at all. The ones that have a 6 after the size of the TV do have, I think, like whatever it is, a tiny number of local dimming zones.
12.
Completely worthless. And I think it's only in the 55 and the 65-inch size that even have that. So over on the M series side, they did a similar thing where there's M, the size of the TV, and then either 7 or 8. If it's 7, it's like 12 or 16 zones of local dimming, and then if it's 8, I think it's like up to 32 zones of local dimming. But again, the 8 is only
the last thing I would be worried about is local dimming.
It's only on the larger sizes. So the V series is like it will accept HDR10 and Dolby Vision and HLG, but it really can't show it to you. It has no HDR capability. Like, it'll take the signal, it'll play it, but it really can't show it to you. The M series actually can show you HDR to a certain degree. So if that matters at all, I don't think he's worrying about HDR. So probably get the V series. It still has AirPlay 2. It still has Chromecast built in. That's probably what you want. And they have one that actually is exactly 50 inches in that series.
I would quite literally go to Amazon or wherever you're planning on buying this from and just look at every one of the models that we just listed and pick that cheapest
Well,
one.
the V55, so not 55, but
should be
V505 is $280. Pretty hard to beat that.
Pretty hard to beat that. Looks like we have time for one
more.
Chris has taken his home theater room down to the studs. He is reconstructing the interior with full soundproofing this time. He plans to have 2 rows of seats, and when he built his theater the first time, he positioned his gear rack in an adjacent room and then had a big opening next to his back row of seats so that he could access the front of his gear from inside the theater and then have the back of his gear exposed to the adjacent room. So everything was open to everything just through the little gear.
Yep. Through the where the gear goes. Yep.
Yeah. He was basically a swinging acoustic panel to cover the front of his gear rack inside of his theater, but now he wants to fully soundproof his his new theater construction. Having this huge hole in the wall with just an absorption panel over it seems like a bad idea. That is true.
We would agree, yes.
The problem is he really doesn't want to have to rewire everything, even though the room is torn down to the studs. Rewiring everything would add considerable cost, and he's happy with his existing wiring. But of course, all the wiring is running through that gear rack location. So should he close up the theater room and only be able to access his gear rack from the adjacent room, it would be inconvenient for physical media, but not the end of the world. Should I just keep reading this?
Whatever you prefer to do. Yeah,
this seems like the same question. Is there some kind of door solution or way to seal the gear rack in the adjacent room? In other words, keep the front of his gear accessible from inside the theater somehow, but also soundproof either the front opening or the entire open back? Is there some solution he hasn't thought of? Well, I mean, I can envision there being like a refrigerator type door that you could install here, that would like lock into place somehow, that had like a rubber gasket all the way around it. But that seems ridiculous.
I'm not in favor of any type of door into his theater. I'm against it.
We have doors into our theater, and sound does leak out a little bit.
Yeah.
It's not like it would be the end of the world. But I mean, if you're really trying to soundproof this room, I mean, if you're really truly, then you have 2 doors to come in. So with
airlock system. Yeah.
But I doubt he's going that full way. But yeah, if it were me, I would just close that wall off and walk around to the other room to install. I mean, I have children. I would just say, go put the disc in.
Right.
That would be that's my old school 1950s remote control right there.
The other thing you could think of in that regard is if the physical media you're talking about is movies, maybe you start making yourself a Plex server, because
that's true.
Then
too.
you
That's
aren't
not a bad suggestion.
physically changing media anymore. But more than that, so let's say he's talking about games, because games, we've run into this situation where he's talking full soundproofing, so this is like double studs, 2 layers of drywall, green glue, the whole shebang, and that could potentially be a problem for your wireless controller if your game system is on the other side of that thick, sturdily constructed wall. We don't want to run into problems with your wireless. I'm thinking a little bit of a hybrid. All right, I'm thinking that all the gear that doesn't need any sort of access, because that's a lot of it, your AV receiver, your amplifiers, all that kind of stuff. You have your existing rack that is still open to your adjacent room. That's where you're going to access everything, and you close up in front of that whole section there. But what you basically have inside your theater is like a 1 or 2 shelf cubby. All right. It's closed at the back, so you can't access the back of it from the adjacent room, but you have this 1 or 2 shelf cubby where you can have your game system that's open to the inside of your theater. So rather than this gigantic hole, it's like it's either closed at the back for the cubby or it's closed at the front for all the other gear that's sitting in this rack in the adjacent room. And then, you're going to have like, where the wire goes, but you seal that up like you're sealing up all your other electrical outlets. And that's a good idea. That's what I would suggest here, because you don't need front face access for every piece of gear. Just probably 1 or 2 game systems, I'm betting, is all you actually need.
And maybe a Blu-ray player, but it really doesn't matter. You're right. Just a little 3-shelf rack
at
in
most,
the room.
yeah.
And you've got your PlayStation or your Switch, your Xbox, and your Blu-ray player, and Bob's your uncle.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it doesn't sound like this. I mean, maybe he will have all of his media stored in this room with him, but it a lot of times in rooms like this, you have the media tucked away into another room anyways.
Right.
So if you're leaving anyways for that, then you might as well leave for this. So, all right, that's a good suggestion. I like that. All right. That'll be it, I guess.
Sounds
we covered a whole bunch of questions. I'm surprised, actually, that there were questions left from last week, because usually when I leave you alone on this podcast, you just keep going.
Well, there were 23 on the list, man. I didn't get through all of that. I got through 18. I did a pretty good smattering. Or 19. That was
great. We only did it says 13, but is that 13 total or 13 that were new for today?
No, 13 total. That's what we got through
13
today.
total is what we did.
Yes.
Okay.
So we have John H. John H was 14. RD was 15. Dan H was 16. Joe T was 17. That's who's left on the list for next week. We'll answer you then. Not the end of the world. We've had worse.
All right. Once again, I want to thank our listeners of the week. We want to thank Jonathan and Russell for going to AVRant.com and clicking on the Buy Us a Cup of Coffee link, and as well as Justin and our 108 or 107 additional patrons over at Patreon.com.
Yeah, Jonathan, Russell, thank you very much for the PayPal donations. Thanks so much to our 108 patrons over at Patreon.com/AVRant Podcast. I said Patreon the other time, but PayPal was the first guys. Jonathan, Russell with PayPal.
Okay.
Patreon is different. Justin, thanks for being one of our 108.
Stop the podcast at this point.
I don't even know what I'm saying anymore. I'm punch drunk.
For AVRant, I'm Tom Antry.
And I'm Rob H. Now go out and listen to something.
Want your question answered? Send it to question@avrant.com. This is AVRant.
Now go out and listen to something.